Hi, my name is Otso Lahti, and I'm here to talk about how to create a digital solution that belongs to everyone. And as said, my name is Otso Lahti. I'm a UI designer and accessibility expert. And I started my career as a developer and then also expanded to UI design. And web accessibility is a natural combination of both roles for me. At Wunder, where I work, our mission is to bring people together and shape the way digital services are used in everyday life. And our vision is to build a world where digital belongs to everyone. But what does belongs to everyone actually mean? It can, of course, mean multiple things. But the way we like to define it is that the solution should be easy to use. So it should be intuitive, simple, and clear. And it should be conventional, so it doesn't try to reinvent the wheel. It should be understandable, so it should use simple enough language, and it should be easy to read. Acronyms and terminology, whenever they're used, they should be explained. And if it's relevant, it should be available in multiple languages. And then it should also be accessible, which is the topic here. So this means that we remove as many barriers to access as possible. So for example, we use text alternatives for images. We use good text contrast, so it's easy to read. We have keyboard support. We use semantic markup for screen readers, so it describes the structure and the contents of the page well. And the implementation should be robust. So it works today and tomorrow with different devices. Now, it also, if possible, should be open source, especially in the public sector. So everyone has a right to reuse and modify these public digital solutions. So during this talk, I will cover the universal benefits from accessibility. I will talk about the principles of web accessibility that we use, but also that are used by a lot of people around the world, and how to successfully create an accessible digital solution. And these are all examples from, the examples that we use are from Wunder's projects. Now let's dig into the universal benefits from accessibility. One term that's used is the curb cut effect. The curb cut is a ramp that is cut into the curb of a sidewalk that helps people in wheelchairs get on and off the sidewalk. But it's not just people in wheelchairs. There are other people who benefit from it as well. So for example, parents pushing strollers, bicyclists, skateboarders, or basically anyone to whom a step might be a challenge. So this way, even though it's an accessibility feature by heart, it becomes a universal design feature. And then it has much more people who benefit from it. There are also good examples from the world of digital. So one example is the audiobook. It has a long history as an alternative way to read for blind people, but it's also really useful to people with some kind of visual impairment or with dyslexia. And then these days, it's also just an alternative way to read text in situations where it's not possible. For example, if you want to listen to a book while you are driving or you're jogging. And it has really become popular in the smartphone era because now we have a device that's always with us and we have access to a really big library of books. And this massive demand for audiobooks means that there are now even more books for people who truly depend on them than ever before. Another example is voice commands. So this could mean Siri or Google. I hope I didn't activate anyone's assistant. And or it could just mean that that situation where you actually use voice to operate your computer. Now, one basic example is if you want to set up a timer, if you're cooking and maybe your hands are like full of the food that you're preparing, and you want to set up a timer quickly. Now, this is possible, but there are also people who might find it much easier and quicker to do daily tasks with voice rather than using the device with their hands. And the final example from the digital world is dark mode. Now, most text on the web is some kind of dark color against the light background. While this does work best for most people, others find it actually much easier to read light text against the dark background for various reasons. But then if we provide both light and dark mode to everyone, people can decide. And then also dark mode, because of the way it uses colors, is actually also usually high contrast. So it's also a good opportunity to provide an even higher contrast to people who find that useful. Here we go to a video that demonstrates dark mode. If you can open that, yeah, okay. So here's a forestry guidance website that we made. As it's in Finnish, but as you can see, it has a lot of text. I go to the operating system settings to change to dark mode, and the website responds by going dark. It's not the operating system doing this, it's the website noticing that, okay, the operating system wants dark mode, so it responds by going dark. It was made that way. Now, the point here is not to only focus on accessibility when there are universal benefits. We need to focus on accessibility no matter what, because it is a human right to be able to access the information. But it does help if you consider that nobody is perfect or fully able. There is no ideal, there is no normal. Designed for actual people. And this way, actually just focusing on accessibility might bring unexpected universal benefits and just make it easier to use for everyone. Now, let's go to the principles of web accessibility. These come from WCAG 2.1, which are the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. The first principle is perceivable. Now, all content must be perceivable. So you should be able to read the content on the page and use it, even if you have old eyes, some kind of visual impairment, color blindness, or maybe you don't have eyesight and or hearing at all. And this leans heavily on the benefits of HTML markup, because its unique ability is to describe what's on the page and the structure of the page. Now, we test perceivability by using a contrast test. We can adjust the text size preference in the browser, try different base text sizes. And the big test is using a screen reader, because there's another, as I mentioned, there's a whole other world in HTML that needs to be tested. And you can also use some kind of visual impairment simulators, such as simulating red-green color blindness, and see how easy it is to understand color differences that way. Now imagine this. In front of you is a content editor. So something like WordPress, Drupal, whatever, if you have used a website content editor, something like that. And but you cannot actually see it because you're blind, or whatever the case is. But with the help of a screen reader, we actually get to hear what's on the page. So in this simplified scenario, we get to hear that there's a header area, so the top portion of the page. And inside that is the typical link to the user profile. And inside the header region, there is another region called the main menu navigation. Now, inside this, we have the typical content editor like links, like the link to all content, link to users, link to settings, maybe link to the system status, and so forth. Maybe you get the idea. We created such a accessible content editor for the Finnish Federation of the Visually Impaired, whose end users are visually impaired or blind, but also some of the content editors. So the content editors all get the same user interface, which is based on Drupal's default admin interface, which is actually already pretty accessible out of the box, but with some light modifications, we could make it even better. And essentially every region, button, link, and form input has a meaningful label. The second principle is operable. Everything must be operable with different human interface devices. So you should be able to use the solution with a keyboard or a mouse or a trackpad or a touch device, for example. And there should also be more than one way to navigate anywhere, if it's an information website at least. So for example, you should be able to reach information via the main menu or through the search. That's one example of getting to information through two different ways. And this applies to all screen and device sizes. So even though we're testing a phone, for example, it does not get a pass simply because it's a touch device. It still needs to, in principle, support the different ways of operating it. There are even more, maybe surprising ways to operate a computer. I mentioned voice commands before. This is possible, has been probably possible for years, but it's even better these days. And you can have these different switches and buttons of different sizes that are programmed to do something that are easier to hit. Or maybe you have something that you squeeze, or maybe it detects that when you blink your eyes and then does something. We could also use eye tracking, which is like using a mouse, but perhaps not as accurate. So we need to have easy big target areas to hit with it. And finally, I mentioned touchscreen because it's still something that we forget about, because touchscreen is not the same as a mouse. So it's a really obviously popular way of using digital solutions. So keep that in mind as well. Now you test operability by using a keyboard only, but also review the navigation. Make sure that it's not depending on maybe opening the main menu, opening a sub menu, and opening yet another sub menu. Make sure that there are multiple ways of getting to information, and not some difficult way that might not work for everyone, or some might not understand that they can find it there. And then, as I said, test with a touchscreen as well, because that is often forgotten. So, and now we're going to see another demo video on how to use a website with only the keyboard. So here we see the Helsinki University Hospital. I pressed the tab key to go to the next clickable element. Here I'm on the language switcher, and I pressed space to open it. And I press tab to go forward. Closed it. Then I get to the main menu links. I open a sub menu with the space again. I press tab to go forward. I press open a sub menu again. Now we're deep in the main menu. I press on a link with enter. And it changes the page. And once it's done that, I press the down arrow to scroll down on the page, and I see the contact information, same as everyone else. Now let's go back to the principles. Here is the third principle. This is understandable. Now this is a bit of a gray area because it's difficult to define understandability, but you need to define a page-wide language. If you have forms, you need to make those in a specific way and handle mistakes in the user input. For example, if they enter their email wrong, that needs to be handled in a specific way. And as you saw, the keyboard focus needs to behave in a specific understandable way. And also the consistency of structures and interface elements is important, so the user understands what everything does on the website and that we don't switch things around for no reason. Understandable can be tested. Automatic translation, you can use that to test that it actually picks up the source language correctly. Use heuristic evaluation, which is just testing it and seeing if the user interface sticks to these common practices. Then inclusive user testing is really important because we need to test with different kinds of people on how well they succeed with a task. And robust is the fourth principle. Really simple, I'll go through this quickly. It's kind of just technical, making sure that it functions today and tomorrow, and that we stick to standards, avoid cheap hacks, and machines are able to test this principle well, because it's essentially talking about how well machines understand your solution. And the way you test robust is by using automated tools such as Site-Improve and Axe. The NVDA screen reader is known to be a bit stricter than others, so if there's something wrong with the page, it might fail easier. Different browsers and devices should also be used as normal. Maybe you already do that in your quality assurance, and just review the code with care. Now, how do we actually successfully create an accessible digital solution? Well, at Wunder, we stick to accessibility throughout lifecycle. We set an accessibility goal. So for example, WCAG 2.1A and AA level. We aim for this goal during design and development, so we keep testing, and also usually aim beyond the goal as well. So that's important. So it's not accessible on paper, but it's like better than that. And then we plan for a third-party audit well before launch, so we have time left to fix any issues that's left. And then we continue reaching the goal after launch, even when we do get new features and we change the solution afterwards. It still needs to be accessible. And we use multidisciplinary project teams, which enables us to do inclusive design and development both in-house. And we also have an accessibility consultant or multiple accessibility consultants who can help make sure that we stick to accessibility and also help with the more complicated accessibility challenges. So to summarize, a digital solution that belongs to everyone is easy to use, understandable and accessible. Inclusive design and accessibility have universal benefits. The 4 principles of web accessibility help us frame accessibility concerns and focus on accessibility throughout the solution's lifecycle. So please make sure your next solution is made for everyone. If you want to find out more, we have information and links available on our website at wunder.io/Wunderpedia. Thank you.
Thank you, Otso. Thank you so much. There are some questions in Slido that we have. In your experience, is there the accessibility difference between static page and a single page app approaches?
Actually, yes, that's a very good question. Let's see if I can answer it quickly. Static page is the main important difference between those two is that single page applications usually, they actually always take over the browser loading of the loading of a new page. And the issue there is that screen readers, for example, and also keyboard support, is kind of relying on the browser reloading the page and starting over from the top. So yeah, with the single page application, you need to make sure that there is, you actually design for around that, so, or for that. So make sure that you do something about that. But there's no short answer to this, but you need to research single page application, for example, React, page load accessibility.
Next question, what is your opinion on now trending flat design?
It doesn't have any, like, I'm not, depends on how you implement flat design. The usual risk perhaps is that if you go too far or you don't consider, for example, what should a button or a link look like? If you don't do that, then the risk is that the user no longer understands what the different elements on the page actually do. So that's the only thing you need to keep in mind. And also, like, usual stuff, text contrast. But yeah, the risk is that the understandability is much lower.
All right, on mobile, do you prefer native apps if comparison to web apps for the usability?
I don't actually have an answer for this, but my hunch is, so only a hunch, this is not factual, but my hunch is that it shouldn't matter as long as both are made correctly on the accessibility side.
Mm-hmm. All right, and there's a broader question. How do you convince businesses that investing in accessibility is a good investment and it pays off?
Yeah, there we go back to the fact that about 1 billion people in the world have some form of disability. And as I mentioned before, there is no ideal person. So we all have our preferences on how we like to use computers and phones and websites. So it's really just, if you focus on accessibility, you will get more happy customers. That's the way I would put it. And just, yeah, and just it reflects the company's values well, because then you are serving all kinds of people.
Okay, thank you. That's a good point. I think companies' values and the how to say, appreciating customers and users of the information side. Thank you so much, Otso. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.